I think the expectation was you were going to move into industry, designing for G-Plan or Urkel or Habitat or a manufacturer of furniture. But my heroes were sculptors like David Nash, Andy Goldsworthy, Richard Long. You work to a certain level, turn it over 180. And so I'm just joining up now, just working round, meeting the two up, and then go back to these missing areas. So that's the natural shape of the tree, but it needs excavating in more, so you get a nice deep shadow. And this is where those mind games about persevering and keeping going until you're happy with it, keeping going until it looks right, because you could stop at several points and think that's enough. The first sculptural things were some spheres, and I'd made one and it sold. Somebody'd seen that and said, could you make one for us? So then it was sort of sculpture and furniture, and then had a phase where I thought, right, I'm not doing any more furniture, I'm just doing sculpture. And I thought, this is it, I've made it, don't need to do benches anymore. And then I thought, actually I like doing benches or seats. You know, it's part of me. Why should I have to be one or the other? So I don't really sit into a discipline. I'm not a sculptor, strictly speaking. I'm not a furniture maker. The sketchbooks go back to the 1990s. I have one on the go all the time. That's where all the commissions that are ongoing, ideas that maybe never come into fruition. Sometimes you might have to go through making models, doing drawings, elevations, even samples of textures or maquettes. But if it was something completely new, like the first egg was, then that's just a question of showing them little pieces that might have a similar texture. There's got to be a kind of a leap of faith with the clients often. So this is really, you kind of almost need a microscope. The ends of this one are not resolved yet. The line disappears and you've got to resolve it into the new space. That bit there, I'm going to kind of sink in. The depth of it will sit quite nice because there'll be a deep bit there, so your eye will bounce from shadow to shadow to shadow over there. An architect said we're doing a refurb on an office block, very minimalist. It needed something to humanise it. Would you be able to do a reception desk, and we're not giving any requirements of a normal reception desk? It'll be flat on the top and the bottom and the back, and it'll be the front face that meanders and wanders to sort of express the character of the tree. And then that grid with the medullary rays and the annual rings, that just carved into the whole of the 5 metre length. So it's essentially a sculpture. Yeah. As much as it is scary, it's exciting because it's the biggest tree that I've ever dealt with, so quite a bit of it is unknown. First of all, we've got to take the bark off, just to see if there's any rot pockets or things that we might want to avoid or excavate. And then it needs to have 2 faces that are perpendicular to each other cut, so that we've got sort of a datum face to work from. And we don't actually know what is going to be in there. I just have an inkling that there's no one clear heart. So when it starts to shift and crack and move, it's not just one split to a heart. It's lots of tensions and splitting and moving within it because of all the many centres. So this is La Sera, which is a sphere sculpture that we made for clients in Italy. Initially, the clients invited me to the site to get a feel for the space and the landscape and the building. So I sat and sketched for a couple of days and sort of starting to germinate ideas about what the sculpture might look like and what the textures might be on it that would be appropriate. And then the tree, this was a fallen tree in Petworth Park that we made the sculpture from. So we took the clients to see it, so they've got an understanding of where the material has come from and start to build up a relationship with that tree, with that wood. And then there's a process of extracting the tree, bringing it back to the studio. The whole log came back to the studio, so we made several pieces from that tree, one of which was La Sera. So the template goes on and gets gradually rotated around the log to reveal the sphere. After that, it's about exposing the annual rings so we can see what's there to get a good surface to bring into focus the annual rings and any knots. So we invited the clients to come and just look at that surface for me to talk through differences that might express very dry summers, or where the outset of a branch growing, where timber is compressed and pushes the grain around. These are things that would inform the end result. So yeah, then it comes inside the building and I start to mark it out, and that process might take a good few days or maybe even a week to mark it out following the annual rings. And then a process using only hand tools to carve all those annual rings, and the dilemmas that you get between a branch meeting the main heart. Artistically, you've got decisions to make. The tree is giving you most of the information, but some of it you have to kind of negotiate. And then raising it to a good working height. Once it's finished here, it then becomes oiled, so there's a protection, slow down the drying rate, and also a bit of protection as it's travelling. And then put into position in site with the help of M-Tech using mobile gantry with lifting block and tackle. So we could position it within the planting bed on its plinth accurately, getting the right angle for catching the details at the right time of the day, sort of the setting sun or the sun coming up in the morning. And then watching it become part of the landscape, not a sculpture dropped from outer space into a garden setting, but it being part and parcel of people's experience of walking through there. And hopefully, because of having been to the site from the outset, the whole thing worked together because it had been carefully thought through from start to finish. There are degrees of concentration for whichever bit you're getting to. And then you start thinking, why didn't I just go straight at that bit? Does it actually matter on the whole thing? But then that's the slippery slope. It's all a test. Oh yeah, it's all a test.